Alright, hi everyone. Okay, welcome to the last video of this particular chapter. Okay, this is quite a big chapter and we spend quite a bit of time explaining about genetic diagram, Punnett square, etc. So for this last part, right, on mutation, it's actually pretty straightforward and it's quite factual for you to understand. Now, when you think about mutation, right, it's important for all of us here to be able to relate it to a structure change in the gene or a change in the number of chromosomes. So in bio, right, we always relate mutation to either a change in the structure of the gene or a change in the number of chromosomes. So likewise for this syllabus, we'll focus on these two things as well. Second part of this lesson is to understand about how certain um, agents can actually result in the increasing rate of mutation. So when you think about mutation, right, most of us here will think about superheroes, mutants that have certain powers, so on and so forth. Okay, but in the real world, right, mutation is not as simple as what it seems like in the movie shows. Okay, so some mutations can actually bring across certain beneficial qualities, but of course, most of the time, mutations actually bring about harmful effects to the organisms. I will study more about this as we go on in this entire concept. Mutation refers to a random change. Okay, take note that it's a random change, which means that it can happen naturally whether or not you are exposed to certain factors that can cause mutation, or it can be accelerated when you're exposed to certain factors that can cause mutation. So the reason why we say it's random is because there's still a lot that we are not sure about or that we do not understand about the DNA structure itself and how mutation can come about. Right? So the change can either be in terms of the structure of a gene or in terms of the chromosome number. Somatic mutations. Somatic mutations are mutations that occur in the normal body cells. Now, these kind of mutations, right, cannot be inherited, right? So, for instance, right, if say that say there's this person that likes to swim a lot or go to the beach a lot and always expose himself or herself to the harmful UV rays without any sunblock, okay, if there's such a person, right, eventually there might be somatic mutations that happen at the skin cells, right? These mutations that happen at skin cells can result in skin cancer, for instance. But because this mutation happen on the skin cell and not on the gametes, that means not on the sperm cells or not on the ovum cells, right? It cannot get passed on to the offsprings. So only mutations that happen in the sex cells or affecting the sex cells production itself, right, can be inherited by the next generation. So it's good to make this clear distinction. But of course, it's also good to clarify to answer that actually some of the illnesses can be genetically inherited, meaning to say that the grandparents actually pass it down to the parents through the gametes. And now, because the parents themselves, right, have that particular genetic illness allele, right, this can also be passed on down to the kid. Okay, because now the entire parents' DNA, right, itself already have that mutated allele already. So because it was passed down from their grandparents, right, so the parents can still pass it down to their children. So the rate of mutation can actually be increased by what we call radiation or carcinogens. Now, if you recall from the previous chapter that you learned, carcinogens refers to chemicals, usually chemicals that can cause cancer. Okay, but do take note that in this chapter, or rather in this concept itself, we are looking at mutation. Mutation need not be the same as cancer growth. Okay, so these two categories of radiations as well as carcinogens, right, can be what I classify as what I call mutagens. Okay, mutagens basically refers to factors that increases the rate of mutation. So these two are the main factors that can result in mutation. Of course, there's other kind of factors like chemicals, etc. So what are the two types of mutation? Number one is what I call chromosome mutation. Okay, chromosome mutation refers to either a change in the structure of the chromosome or a change in the number of chromosomes. Okay, for our syllabus, we'll focus a lot on the number of chromosomes. And because we will be talking about this disease that's called Down syndrome. The other type of mutation will be a change in the gene, a mutation in the gene. So remember, a mutation is a random change. So this is referring to a random change in the structure of the gene. So when the DNA structure changes, because when the gene is part of the DNA, so when the DNA structure changes, it can result in variation that gives rise to new kind of alleles. Okay, and these new alleles can in turn bring across certain issues or certain conditions. So in this chapter itself, we'll focus on these two particular conditions. One is called albinism and one is called sickle cell anemia. Right, these two are actually both caused by recessive alleles. But of course, in your course of revision, you might come across questions that actually touches on other kind of conditions that can be caused by dominant alleles as well. So let's take a look at the first mutation, chromosome mutation. Let's take a look at Down syndrome as an example. Now, the normal humans, right, have 46 chromosomes in all their body cells. Right, that's something that we have learned before. Okay, and we know that within these 46 chromosomes, right, they can be arranged in terms of 23 pairs of what I call homologous chromosomes. So they come in pair, right? So for people with Down syndrome, they actually have 47 chromosomes. Whereas the extra one, it actually happens at the 21st or the 21st pair. Okay, which means that they have an extra copy of the chromosome 21. How did they even get this extra copy of chromosome 21? So what most likely is supposed to happen is that during the genetic inheritance process, whereby the parents actually have the child, okay, what could have happened is that, so this is a genetic diagram as you can see over here. If we just focus on chromosome 21, okay, the 21st chromosome, that pair of chromosome, right, you realize that both the dad and the mom, in their normal body, right, they should have 2 copies of chromosome 21. Because all parents have 23 pairs of homologous chromosome, so they should have 2 copies of chromosome 21. When they form the gametes, okay, we know that the law of segregation says that, okay, the chromosomes will separate, right? So just like the alleles will separate, right, from the genotype. So in this case, the dad can have 2 different kinds of sperms, okay, likely to have one sperm that has the 21st chromosome, one set of it only. This is the 21st chromosome, one set of it only, because your gametes are haploids, right? So they only have 23 chromosomes. Okay, so this is what happens. But your original parent cells are diploid. Okay, that's why they have 46 chromosomes. Most likely, the occurrence is that during the female, the mother side, okay, what happens is that when the gamete is formed, right, chances are that one of the egg might have 2 copies of chromosome 21, whereas the other possibility of the egg actually has nothing. Okay, so what happens now is that you actually have double 2 sets of chromosome 21, but it's still within one ovum, but it's supposed to be haploid. So this means that, right, inside this ovum itself, right, instead of having 23 chromosomes, right, this ovum will have 24 chromosomes because it has one extra of the 21st one. These sperms over here, they have 23 chromosomes. Okay, because there's no issue in terms of the formation of the gametes. Right, 90% of the time for Down syndrome, right, usually the mom is the one that actually has the ovum that has the extra copy of chromosome. Okay, but around 5% or so of the time is actually from the dad that has the extra copy of the chromosome 21. So what happens is that when the sperm and the ovum fertilize, right? So in this case, if this particular sperm and this particular ovum fertilize, you realize that the zygote that is formed, right, will actually end up with a total of 47 chromosomes because it's 23 plus 24. And this zygote will actually have one extra copy of chromosome 21. Yeah? And like what you learned before, when the zygote is formed, it will actually further divide to form the embryo. And the embryo will then implant itself into the uterine lining and you'll form the fetus, etc. This will mean that from this point onwards, each cell will have 47 chromosomes because the zygote already has 47 chromosomes. And as the child develops in the mother's womb, right, eventually this fetus, all the cells within itself will have 47 chromosomes or so. And with that comes certain issues, either on the neurological development, etc., etc. Okay, so this is actually how chromosome mutation can result in Down syndrome. There's other kind of chromosome mutation. If you're interested, you can go and Google about it. Now, the second kind of mutation, which is gene mutation, we're going to take a look at 2 examples. Number 1 is albinism. Now, albinism is caused by a mutation in a recessive allele. So what happens is, right, this recessive allele actually affects the ability of the human body to produce the pigment called melanin. Okay, melanin is actually this pigment that allows our body to have this skin color that you are seeing now. Okay, in fact, melanin is also the one that actually makes you become tanner when you go under the sun for too long. So this is actually a pigment that's found in all our skin itself. So for people with albinism, right, because they have the recessive allele, okay, this recessive allele, and remember that for them to have this condition, right, they must be homozygous recessive because recessive allele only expresses itself under the homozygous condition. So you're looking at a condition like, for instance, small a, right? When you have this condition, that's when this alleles effects is the most pronounced. Okay, so People with albinism, we call them the albinos. Okay, they actually get sunburned very easily because they are very sensitive to sunlight. And their appearance wise, you'll notice that they will be very fair skin, right? And their eyes, their skin, etc., will have a very pink hue because it's actually the blood vessel that's below the skin. The other kind of gene mutation is what we call sickle cell anemia. Now, sickle cell anemia, right, is caused by a recessive allele. Okay, this recessive allele actually affects the production of hemoglobin. Likewise, because it's caused by a recessive allele, right, it can only express itself when it's in the homozygous recessive condition. Okay, so only when a person has actually inherited recessive alleles from both parents, that means the person ends up becoming homozygous recessive, then this condition will be showing. Now, what is the effects of this condition? Basically, the red blood cell that you learned before, right? You learned that it's actually biconcave in shape. Okay, but for people with sickle cell anemia, what happens is that their red blood cell will actually become a sickle cell shape, like you see over here, because it actually affects the hemoglobin. Okay, we'll take a look at a video to understand more about how this mutation actually comes about. Before that, it's good to understand that with sickle cell anemia, these red blood cells actually have lower oxygen carrying capacity. Okay, and they tend to clump together. So in this diagram, right, you will see that the normal red blood cell, the biconcave one, right, they tend to be able to move very freely, easily throughout the entire blood capillary. But for the sickle cells, they tend to clump together. And of course, when they clump together, right, they result in blood clots, right? That can in fact affect the patient itself, and they usually die young. Okay, but it's good to understand why exactly do they have low oxygen carrying capacity, and why will they actually clump together. So to understand this, right, let's take a look at a video to have more info about this entire condition.
Sickle Cell Anemia by Harsh Patel for University Level Bio. So sickle cell anemia, in a nutshell, is a genetically inherited disease affecting your blood. It takes healthy red blood cells in your body and turns them into sickle-shaped cells, which can cause your blood vessels to get blocked off, limiting oxygen in your body, causing many effects. Some of these effects include getting abdominal pains. Along with that, you can get joint pains and death of tissues due to low amounts of oxygen. Now, what causes this intriguing disease? Well, it all begins with the synthesis of hemoglobin S. So as we all know, there are chromosomes within our nucleus. In this disease, the 11th chromosome is altered. Within the DNA of this chromosome, the hemoglobin beta gene is mutated, creating hemoglobin S, or sickle hemoglobin. Originally, the hemoglobin is in charge of transporting oxygen from your lungs to other parts of the body, which it still does, but now once the oxygen is released, the cells start to stick together and change their shape into a crescent-like formation, blocking off certain vessels. Now, how is this inherited, you ask? Well, what happens is you have a mom and dad who are heterozygous for this trait. In this case, the little t represents sickle cell anemia. Both recessive genes are acquired from the parents, and the offspring will have sickle cell anemia. People who carry this recessive gene have sickle cell trait. Now, the populations which are affected by this include people from the African ancestry, Middle Eastern, Indian Asian, and Mediterranean. This is because that is where malaria originated, but through evolution, this mutation was able to fight it. Symptoms of sickle cell anemia include shortness of breath, dizziness, headaches, coldness in hands and feet, paler than normal or mucous membranes, and jaundice.
As you can see from the video, you notice that sickle cell red blood cell, right? Those kind of red blood cell that's sickle cell shaped, right? They tend to clump together, and when they clump together, they actually affect the blood flow, which in turn means that you actually stop oxygen and certain important nutrients from flowing to different parts of the body. And this can in fact result in very fatal conditions for the patient. In addition, one interesting fact to take note for sickle cell anemia is that individuals who are heterozygous for the sickle cell anemia, which means that they have a dominant one and the recessive allele, okay, if they are heterozygous, they tend to actually be more resistant to malaria. It's quite interesting because in areas like West Africa, where malaria is very prevalent, these individuals are usually the one that can survive better than those who just have the dominant alleles. This is out of the notes already. So basically, whatever you're supposed to copy down, right, should already be done already, and your notes should be completed. But this is to additional information to let you know that in Africa, this heterozygous genotype actually provides a certain kind of advantage. Yeah, and these people are actually able to survive because they don't get malaria that easily. one of the hypotheses that has been came out with is that because in people who are heterozygous, right, there is still some sickling effect. Okay, this sickling effect of the red blood cell means that although not all the red blood cells are sickle cell in shape, okay, there are still some of them that are sickle cell in shape. As a result, this actually lowers the oxygen level to the extent that it causes the cell to die. And if there's a parasite of the malaria parasite in the cell itself, right, the parasite will be destroyed as well. So because of this, it actually helps to provide some kind of advantage or defense to these people that are heterozygous. Okay, but of course, the homozygous recessive people that has both of the sickle cell recessive allele, right, they tend to die from the condition. Okay, then those who don't have the alleles at all, the normal one, they tend to die of malaria. So it's usually the group that's heterozygous that tend to survive in this part of the world. Now, this is actually an additional bit of information for you guys to understand about this entire chapter, because we didn't actually brought across this idea of natural selection, but some of you might have already heard about this thing before. So I thought I'll just elaborate a bit more on what exactly does it mean. Now, I mentioned at the very start of this video that mutation can either be harmful or beneficial. Now, of course, individuals with harmful mutation, that means those that is a disease or certain disadvantage to the person, right, will actually be eliminated out of the entire population. And those with beneficial mutation will then live on to have more offspring than the normal ones, right? And this is actually what is termed as natural selection. Now, natural selection means that the nature will select for organisms that have more favorable characteristics to survive and reproduce. Now, take note of this term itself, more favorable. Favorable doesn't mean that the condition or the characteristics is the best. It just means that at that particular point in time is the one that's most suited, most adapted for survival. This is Charles Darwin. Okay, he's the founding father of evolution itself. Now, natural selection, according to him, is a process that ensures that the best adapted organisms in a population survive, and they reproduce and they pass on their genes to the next generation. Take note of the term best adapted. So, for instance, right, if today having a certain trait is good for you to survive, it doesn't mean that 10 years later having that same trait will be good enough for you to survive. Alright, so it's always about which one is the most well adapted one at that particular point in time that allows the organism to reproduce. In terms of natural selection, it's good to understand that nature tends to select varieties of organisms that are more resistant to disease. They are better adapted to changes in the environment. So over here on the right side, I have this short, small diagram on the evolution of the horse. If you're interested, you can go and Google about this, and you realize that how come the horses that we see right now today, right, in the world, actually have certain characteristics that are not found in the earlier generations of horse. And because of this process, whereby nature keeps selecting for varieties of organisms that are more resistant to disease, that are better adapted to changes, this will in turn result in more complex types of organisms being arising from simpler ancestral forms. And this is actually what we call evolution. Right? So if you're very interested in evolution and natural selection, right, you can actually go and read up more about this concept using the links that's provided in this YouTube video. So you can go and find out more about these two scientific theories. Okay, if not, that's all we have for this chapter. And remember to complete the assignment that you've been assigned to. Thanks.